think we're live.
All right, I think we are. I think we are good to go. Good day, developers. Good day, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. This is my favorite conference. I'm Marcel Ferreira. I'm a senior product manager in the Power Apps product team. I look after pro developers. I love code, and I have here with me a modern full stack developer, Scott.
Yeah, my name is Scott Giroux, and I'm a cloud developer advocate with Microsoft. And I'm really privileged to be here to talk to you about accelerating full stack software development using the Power Platform. But before we start, we thought we'd just do a little bit of a survey to just get to know you in the room. And I'm going to take a picture when people put their hands up.
Yes, so do you work with Power Apps today? Are you a maker? If you do, please, okay. Lots of people, that's good. Do you write code? Do you write front end? It doesn't matter the technology, any technology stack. Do you write UIs? That's a good number of people, that's great. Are you on backend developers? Do you write APIs like in the middleware? That counts as a backend as well. Lots of people. Some people raise the hand twice. It means you are a full stack, right? So, all right.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. So we're talking about the Power Platform, which is a low-code platform. But before we start, I thought we could tell you a little story. So if you're sitting comfortably, once upon a time, in the busy world of Contoso Inc., a team of full-stack professional developers embarked on an ambitious project. They'd heard of a faraway land where applications could be built with less code, so they set off to this nirvana of low-code app development. They journeyed long and hard in their quest, but were met with some challenges upon the way. At first, the developers felt like magicians, conjuring applications out of thin air. But as they delved deeper, whilst brilliant in their simplicity, these low-code solutions couldn't quite twist and turn as they needed. The team found themselves a little bit adrift in this sea of declarative programming, their instincts clashing with this new way of thinking. Whilst they navigated through this valley of low-code despair, suddenly a beacon of hope flickered on the horizon, an online tutorial, glowing like the North Star. With renewed hope, they immersed themselves in this tutorial. But to their dismay, they found that the promise of a solution was just a mirage, and it didn't do exactly what they needed. The whispers got louder. Had we stuck to pro code, we'd be done by now. But in this pit of abandoned low-code projects, they met this mystical Copilot, a wise and magical wizard. With Copilot's encouragement and guidance, the developers boldly experimented and learned to rapidly create low-code solutions. They learned that they didn't have to give up their pro code. Instead, they could extend and enhance the foundations of low-code, only where pro code truly delivered the most value. The project transformed into an age of accelerated full-stack development where low-code and pro-code makers danced in perfect unity. And they all coded happily ever after. The end. Or is it?
That's a great story that I think lots of people can correlate. But let's forget about low-code for a minute. Okay? This session today is about full-stack development. So I think it's important to define what actually full-stack development means. Can you help us here, Scott?
Well, that's a great question, Marcel. I think to be a full-stack developer, you have to be obviously good at the back-end, databases. You have to be good at middle-tier API management. You have to be good at front-end user interface libraries. And you also have to be good at security. You have to be good at performance optimization. You have to be good at deployment. And you have to be good at so many different libraries and frameworks. And let's face it, it's an architecture and a landscape that's changing, well, quicker than the color of my hair. So, and being a modern full-stack developer today means you also got to be good at M365, Teams, AI, and there's so many other things like governance, and gone are the days that we could just build everything ourselves. But let's take a look at a full-stack example. So this is in GitHub. You can go and check this out. This is under the Azure samples. It's Contoso Real Estate. And the architecture is a a very complicated one, actually. It uses many, many different components. We've got, at the top, we've got a portal, which is the idea is that you can go and reserve rental properties. You can search and make payments on there. And it's using Azure Static Websites, it's using a CDN, and there's also support, an AI support assistant. Obviously, there's an AI support assistant. And then there's an API that communicates with, and there's also Azure Pub Sub in there for doing notifications. And then we've got Azure Portal APIs hosted by Azure Functions, and those are handling searching of listings, doing payments. And then the back end has got an integration to Stripe, using a container that's using Node.js. And then there's Contoso, the database that's in the Azure DB, Azure Cosmos DB. And then also we've got all of the goodness of Azure, like Entra ID, monitorability, and it's using VS Code and TypeScript, and we've got Bicep scripts to deploy it. We've got testing using Playwright, and then on the top of that, we've got a backend which is doing headless CMS and managing listings using Next.js on the server and Strapi. So it's got there's a complex architecture there. And of course, this architecture has got so many components. We're not building them all from scratch, right? Some of them are open source, some of them are built on Azure. And ever since the dawn of software, it's always been about low code. It's always been about less code, actually. Because it's a commitment to clarity, it's a commitment to consistency and efficiency. And every time we pick one of these components, be it like an API management or an open source library, it's about writing less code so that we can concentrate on prioritizing the user experience and prioritizing our own time, the business value of our time. We can minimize security vulnerabilities. We can minimize bugs. And I used to think of myself as a full stack developer, actually. And I often ask myself, why, when I started using Power Platform, did I just not look back? And I think the reason is that the platform does all the heavy lifting for me. So it doesn't matter if it's pro code or low code. It's about less code and it's about smart code, because there's less code to maintain, lower total cost of ownership. We don't have to patch. No one wants to wake up and find that there's a security vulnerability that we have to go and patch early on a Monday morning, right? We've got less breaking changes, because the components that we're using in Power Platform, actually, the number of breaking changes over the years have been so few. And if there is a breaking change, you get actually at least a year, usually more, notice about it. And it's metadata driven, so it's smart because you can make a change in one place and that ripples throughout all the different places you use it, be it a column name or a table name or a user interface component. And then you've got built-in authentication and role-based management for users. You've got simplified deployment. One of the most complicated things about coding these days is actually how do we get it into production? How do we manage scripts to make database changes? Well, actually, when you deploy using Power Platform, it automatically does all this stuff for you. It works out the differences between the last time you deployed and the next time you deployed. It works out what scripts it needs to write automatically to apply those changes to the database. And then there is enterprise-grade monitorability and governance all built in. So this doesn't matter if it is low code, if it's pro code, if it's Azure, if it's Power Platform. We're always about trying to write smart code like this. But Marcel, how does Power Platform fit into all of this?
Yeah, let's go back to low code land, and let's define a little bit Power Platform. So the Contoso real estate solution, that solution is a great example of a composable architecture. It's a full stack solution that you can host on Azure. Power Platform is a way for you to extend Azure as well. Actually, Power Platform is built on Azure, and you can extend with low code, but also with the power of code, okay? And let's see a common scenario. Actually, organizations usually, they have in the core a very rigid system. This is where it is your ledger, payment system. This kind of system, they don't change very often by design. It's very risky to change there, right? Usually, one layer above, you put your specific solution, your custom solution, which is to solve your specific problem. This is where the Contoso it is. And a common mistake when trying to adopt the Power Platform is trying to replace Power Platform by all the components that you already have. You don't have to do that. The proposal it is you can put Power Platform on a top layer, And then you can create a safe-to-fail environment where you will not only enable the less technical users in a controlled environment, but also it will enable technical developers to have an environment where they can change and innovate with less friction. They can leverage all the power of Power Platform on the back end, all the goodness and cutting-edge technology, such as Copilot, right? And I want to highlight today, really, which is we have a rich ecosystem of developer tools. This is what my team does. And we have in the center Power Platform CLI, which provides a consistent way for you to interact with all the components of the platform. Okay? And because we have that, we can develop specific experiences. We have VS Code extension, Visual Studio integrations, and then you can use the power of code, your TypeScript, your C# to really take Power Platform to the next level. And when you are ready to deploy, you can do that using all the ALM good practices. You can do CI/CD by using GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or even custom scripts. All the ways developers are familiar with already, right?
So Power Platform, surely that's just drag and drop. So you just go in and you just drag components on. And what about source code? If I'm a full stack developer, I want to see my source code.
That's a good question. So let's go to a demo, and then I will be able to share as well some new features of the product, right? So let's go, shall we? We will start here in Power Apps Studio. Here is how you create a business application over a canvas. We created this one with the help of Copilot, and then after that, with drag and drop, we added some PowerFX expressions to create a better application. And usually, developers, when they come here for the first time, they always ask, what about the source code? Can I have the source code? You got it, now you can. So what you can do, it is on the tree view now, we are adding a code view. So basically, you can see the code underneath. We are unlocking the mystery of the source code for Canvas applications, okay? Then you can use this to understand a little bit better Power Apps Studio. You can find, and because of that, we can start to develop specific experiences for code-first developer right here in Power Apps Studio, okay?
I think that, yes, a round of applause, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, that's great, right? But you might ask, OK, what about the source code? I want to source control that. Let's have a look on that. So let's shift gears here a little bit. The way we do ALM in Power Platform is through solution. Solution is a way for you to package all the different components. I have here a solution called Composer Real Estate. What we are doing today, we are extending that example with Power Platform. We have two groups of components here. We will classify in low-code components. These are the ones that you create here in Maker Portal by drag and drop, and also code-first components. These are traditional code, right? Let's focus on the low-code first. You can see all of them here, but first we will see the low-code. So here I have a list of all my components. I have my Canvas application that I've just seen. That's a low-code component. I also have my code-first components here. I created some tables as well by drag and dropping. I have everything here in my solution. And what we are doing now, we are announcing a new source code integration. So you can actually connect your solution or your environment to your source control. Okay? So here you will see the list of all the artifacts that you created or updated. And once you are ready, you can commit. And this will commit the code in your repository. How cool is that? And yeah, here you have information about the repository, right? And here is the source code. So here I have the representation of the same solution that you see in the portal, but in a code format. So let's have a look on the Canvas application that we have seen before. This is my solution. This is my Canvas application. Before, if you do today in the product, if you export a solution, you will see a MSF file, which is a binary. Not anymore. Now, by using this integration, you will see the source code for the Canvas application. The same source code I show in Power Apps Studio. You have a folder, a new folder called SRC, with one PA.yaml file for your Canvas application and one PA.yaml file for each screen that you have. Okay? And this code is a combination of YAML and PowerFX, and by design is understandable by makers as well. Okay? Because I have the source code now, I can start to develop specific experiences for the code-first developer. For example, I can select any control and right-click and copy. Then I copy the code. This will get the YAML code, so I can share a component over Teams, for example. Here, to show the capabilities, I will open my Canvas in VS Code. And another thing we will provide, which will come, it is a schema file that will help you to describe this format. It's basically a public contract. So I can understand a little bit about the properties here, what this property does, and I also have a list of the supported controls, things like that. So you can also use VS Code to edit here, okay? This version of the source code, I created 2 new controls to show the picture and the name of the user, and what I can do is I can copy this code, go back to Power Apps Studio, and I will select here the header, and then I will paste the code, and this will create the new controls for me.
Wait, so you've just pasted code directly into a Canvas app?
Yes,
no
exactly.
No drag and drop involved?
Exactly. How cool is that? And yes, this is just the beginning again. The goal is really to enable code-first developers. We will also create experiences for you to edit the code right here, okay? At the first stage, the focus is on the source code, so please try these features, give us feedback, okay? Okay, that's the low-code components, right? Let's switch to the code-first components. You might ask, what about code, right? We extended this with code-first components as well. Scott will explore in a minute, but let's see the source code, what it looks like. And this will be more familiar to developers. I will go to VS Code, where I have the Contoso repository, okay? What we did, I want to give credits for Scott, an amazing job he did. We are extending the solution with Power Platform. So UI, how do we extend UI? Let's have a look here. We have a new image grid control, and this is basically just a TypeScript code. It's a React control that we wrapped in what we call a PCF. Scott will explore more in a minute. But the point here is about source code. So we have a PCF proj file. And what this project does, it is I can use build to generate a deployable asset. In this scenario is a bundle.js. Okay, that's the UI part. What about the backend? Everybody wants to consume APIs, right? And if you have to, and I'm sure you do, if you want to consume APIs on Power Platform, you can create custom connectors. That's super easy. And you can have open API files that you put in your source control. If you want to go one step ahead and really integrate with the backend, you can create virtual entities. So you can integrate with all the power of the backend Dataverse without the need of migrating the data. And you do that by adding C# code. This is standard C# code, and we have here a CS proj file that we will build in a DLL or a NuGet package. It depends on your setting, okay? So these are the code-first components, nothing new. But how do you merge all of this together, the low code and the code-first? Is through a solution. That's where you fuse this together. That's why we call fusion development, right? And our solution is basically a CDS proj. It has reference for all the other projects. And the way we build that, it might be familiar to you, is using .NET Build. So .NET Build will put all these components together. And here I have a code description, including the low-code components, OK? And this will generate a solution, which is here is a zip format. And then I can move to the next environment, right? And because I'm using a VS extension with Power Platform CLI, I could do that right here from my environment by importing the solution to my Dataverse environment. Here I have the list of my environments, the list of my solutions, but I can also do CI/CD. I can create a script, automate all of this in a repeatable way. And another good thing about CLI is security, right? You can authenticate through user and password. Don't do that. You can use service principal. You can use managed identity. And now you can also do workload identity federation. It means you can connect your repo to Dataverse or to Power Platform with no need of certificates or secrets. It is really easy to maintain your repository and is really safe, right? So hopefully by now I convinced you that we can manage source code, right? So let's go back to the presentation. So I'm definitely going to be copying and pasting from Stack Overflow now. Please do. And let us know how it goes. That's the definition of a development platform right there. And of course, what we're doing there is that we're trying to show that Power Platform is a development platform. It's a software development platform. And it just should be seen as a part of your toolbox in the same as all the other languages that you use, all of the other tools. So we've seen how it enables you to
manage your source code, how you can get up and running very quickly. But what about specifically, how does the Power Platform accelerate full stack development? Well, with traditional full stack, there is a very, very quick getting up and running. npm install, npm start. Very, very quick. You can use containerization to deploy, host, CI/CD pipelines, super, super quick. But whilst you're doing that, there is a buildup of technical debt. And I'm sure many of you will have experienced this. That when you want to transform, when you want to go into production, into further downstream environments, there's an awful lot of tasks that are kind of waiting there, lurking under the surface, icebergs waiting to hit you for like configuration, deployments, and security auditing, optimization, patching, administration, and monitoring, all of these different things that are needing to be done. Well, with Power Platform, you may have a little bit more effort up front to set up your environments, to set up your solution, as Marcel was just showing, and then setting up some of the deployment pipelines. But once you've done that, it pays dividends down the line. You benefit from that using the governance features of Power Platform, enables you to have guardrails in place, security, isolation, so that you're making sure that you've got agility to be able to respond to business changing needs, the agility to experiment and to innovate. And that, for me, is really where the Power Platform is special. It allows you don't have to replace everything. It allows you that agility to rapidly innovate and build on top of what you already have in your landscape. And a great example of this is in Power Pages. So Power Pages, when you want to go live, you've built your site. You have a go-live checklist. It's built in. You've got a security check that it will run and give you a rating. And there's some new preview features, actually, that have just come out that will do even further additional checks on your site as well. So there are many reasons to take this architecture, which is the traditional Contoso real estate architecture, and take that and then replace components in here. For example, some of them may be end of life. Some of them may be using technologies that I know nothing about, and the person who's maintaining that has left the company. Seen that happen. We want to maybe modernize it, or maybe want to use AI. But what components in here, Marcel, could I use Power Platform for?
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's start with the portal, right? Let's say I'm having problem, it's too expensive to maintain that. So I will leverage all the hard work of maintaining that for Power Platform. I will start with Power Pages. In Power Pages, we will create our portal. And we will have we will create all the data in Dataverse. It means that I can create a model-driven application to manage this website very easily. Because now I have Power Pages, I can innovate, and I can put a Copilot there. An experience for my external users. They can experiment Copilot. On the back end, I'm using Stripe, right? So I will keep using that. That is deeply connected to my ERP. I'm not changing that. So I will just use the API, but I want to go deeper. I want to integrate with my entities. So I will use a virtual entity to get all the benefits of the Power Platform without the need of moving my data. And now that I have that, I can also create new applications. I can create Canvas applications, maybe a mobile app for my users to go ahead and manage the real estate from the phone. I can provide integrations with Teams, SharePoint. We have lots of connectors out of box to connect to your system, to Microsoft ecosystem, but also other systems. It makes really simple to innovate, and again, in a safe-to-fail environment. Okay? And I'm doing this with Power Platform, but I have components from Azure that I want to keep using. Let's say I want to use my UI control, my look and feel, I want to keep the same. Can I reuse this component? So shall we see how we extend it, how it looks like?
Yeah, so let's take a look at how we can extend the front end using Power Platform. Because I think the key message there is that is a composable architecture. Because we're not saying take and replace everything. And that is a common misconception that I hear a lot of people saying. So if you're telling me I want to use Power Platform, I want to replace everything. Well, let's see how you can actually take Power Platform and extend Power Platform, as well as build on top of those existing components. So what I've got here is this is the GitHub repository for the Contosa real estate. And so you can see here we've got all of these different components in the packages. You can go and check that out. And what I've done here is I've actually used Copilot. I've asked Copilot to build me an app to manage real estate. So what it's done is it's created me tables with lots of different properties and to put some sample data in here, and it's got me, a long way. I can go and edit these, and I asked it to be able to have features that I wanted to be able to select from, on each of the different properties. But I want to take this one step further. And when I'm building a Canvas app, it's very, very quickly up and running. But sometimes you reach the point where you're pushing it to that to the limits, perhaps. And so here what I've done is I've added in a gallery of images, which is very easy. You can see if I select this gallery, I can go to the filter here. This is bound to a particular list of images, and it's only filtering where it's only showing the images where the listing select is matching the gallery. But if I wanted to show a component that allows me to swipe left and right to show those different images, and maybe go full screen, and maybe so it works on a mobile with touch, well, this is where we can use what Marcel was showing as a PCF, a Power Apps Component Framework. And the great thing about this is that it appears as a component that makers can use. So I can, as a developer, create this using React, and I can then publish it and then as a component and deploy it very easily. And then I can just use it inside my Canvas app. So you can see here I've got an image grid. So if I go and enable this inside my app and see what it looks like, and then run this, you can see here now I've got the ability to swipe left and right on here. I can also go full screen. I could perhaps go and get this kind of similar functionality using low code and Power Effects, but what you'll start to do is you start to push perhaps the boundaries of low code, and then you find maybe that the maintenance of that code is going to become a little bit difficult because it's maybe overcomplicated. Whereas when you write this in TypeScript, it's actually very, very simple because all you're doing is you're bringing in an NPN library. In this case, I'm just using a React library that I'm bringing in, which is the swiper component. And there's very, very little code involved. And so once I've built that component, I can use it in many different places. So here I've got a model-driven app, which is a forms over data, metadata-driven app, rather than a Canvas app, which is very screen layout-centric. And so if I select one of the records here, I've used exactly the same component here. And so this form is all driven by metadata. And I can also take that one step further. So in Power Pages here, this is a Power Pages that I was created again using Copilot. So ask it to manage listings, real estate listings. And what I've got is a metadata-driven grid here. And so if I go and look at this, what this looks like, Power Pages just rendering all of the different columns using the metadata from Dataverse. And if I select one of these records here, it's now going to render that same form that I generated inside in model-driven apps with the metadata. And because it's the same form, rather than showing a grid of images, it's showing me the same component there. Now, if I wanted to take this one step further, PCF allows me to do that in Power Pages specifically. It allows me to do even further. So let's say I wanted to be able to display my listings, not in just a grid. I wanted to show my listings in a kind of a grid, a card form here. So I can go down here and select each of these different listings and view the details, and I can go and search for the different views. Well, this is using a multi-page application architecture. It's actually going off to the server, requesting, and so if I come into Power Pages, I can manage Power Pages. It's just it's HTML code here, and it's templated HTML code. So if I come down to what this looks like, there is a query that goes and queries the listings, and so you can see here it's going and saying where the description matches the query that I've passed it, and then it's going to go and iterate over each of the different entities in the results, and it's going to render Bootstrap cards. So that's a request response. But if I wanted it to create something a little bit more complicated, where more of a modern user interface, this is where PCF allows me to do, is I can create a React user interface here. So here I've got the ability to filter by the price. So you can see it's dynamically changing the results here. I can filter by the different features, and it will filter those results. And so that is built using PCF and then deploying that. And what's really great about that is that you can then get the best of both worlds. And in the same way as in Canvas apps, you can then have that component that's reusable, and you can still use all low code. What we're also doing here is we're using a component that sits inside the content management system of Power Pages. So you can see here, this is a component that we can't change using a low code, but what we can do is we can still change all of the copy around it. So you can see I can edit the listing, I can change the security on it. And what this is doing is it's actually using the API. So it's not actually binding to a request for a page in the same way as the grid was. This is going and calling an API that's hosted by Power Pages. So Power Pages gives you an API, a REST API that you can go and query using React. And then you can bring that back, and it manages all the security for you. So if I'm logged in, it's only going to give me access to the data that I ask. So you don't need to handle that for you. It's handling that heavy lifting and all of that plumbing for you to make sure that you have less security vulnerabilities. So we talked about that's extending front end. But what about back end? So Marcel was just showing that we have Stripe integration, and we don't want to replace that, because that's probably going to be used in other areas of our organization. It's going to be used by other parts of applications, maybe doing payments. Also, maybe there's integration, very complicated integration to our finance system, or processes that have got existing data that we don't want to touch inside Cosmos DB. Well, what we can do here, if I swap back over to the slides, we've got a number of different options. We can use something called a custom connector. And a custom connector is, what it does is it allows us to take an open API definition, which as Marcel showed is already in the Contoso real estate sample. There is already an open API definition there. And we can bring that into Power Platform and create a custom connector. And so that we then can call all the different actions on that. And now from Power Apps, from Copilot Studio, from Power Automate, and we can manage all the security, and then that then calls those Azure functions and then passes that on to Cosmos DB and interacts with it. And then the great thing is that we can then manage all of the deployment as using the governance and the pipelines in Power Platform. So we don't need to worry about how do we writing bicep scripts to get all of that in there. It's automatically going to do that for us. But what about if we wanted to have more of a relational access to that data? Well, we can do that using something called virtual tables, which is a feature of Dataverse. And in the same way as we've got OpenAPI, what we can do is we can actually create something called a virtual data provider using C#. So in Dataverse, we've got standard tables, which can be hosted in Azure SQL, blob storage, Elastic tables in Cosmos DB. But if we wanted to create a relational structure so that we had, for a reservation, there is a relationship to a number of different payments, but those payments exist in a completely different system. Well, that's what virtual tables allow us to do. So we create a C# provider. There are out-of-the-box ones for SharePoint, Excel, Azure SQL, Salesforce, but we can create these custom providers using C#. And then once we've done that, that would then call the payments API. And then when I interact with that table, it acts exactly the same as all of the native tables inside Dataverse. And in so much so that I can actually access those using their web API. So I can even call them using Power Pages or Canvas apps or model-driven apps.
Yeah, so in this scenario, you are happy with your API. You don't have any maintenance. You are using all the power of the platform without need of migrating the data, right?
Exactly, that's right. It stays exactly where it is, and we just access it and tell Dataverse about the metadata definition of what it is. So here is the OpenAPI definition. So if I search for payments in here, then we'll see the definition of that. We've got get all payments. We've got get or create payment. And if I come over into the C# of this, what we can see is, actually what we're going to do is, this is the OpenAPI. We're going to look at a custom connector. So I can go into new custom connector, and I can import an OpenAPI file from a URL or from my disk, or I can even import it from GitHub or a Postman collection. I can even import it from an Azure API management definition as well.
You can do from CLI as well if you want.
CLI, absolutely. That's your baby, right?
Oh, yes.
So if I edit this custom connector, what it's done is it's taken that OpenAPI definition and it's interrogated it and it's created a number of different actions. What I've done here is I've also showing that there are we're using environment variables. So when I deploy this custom connector from different environments, then I can define the endpoint. So I don't have to hard code any endpoints. And if I come into test here, I can then go and select find payments. So you can see these are the definitions of the OpenAPI, and I can go test. And what it's doing here is it's going to go and return my JSON. So what that means is that we now have got the ability to call that through a number of different places. I'm going to show how we can call that using Copilot Studio. So if I want to have an AI assistant, because part of this sample there's an AI assistant on the website, and I wanted to be able to have an administration function to be able to interact with those payments, I can come over into the actions here, and I can add an action, and I can now call that custom connector that I've created. So if I say payments, and search down here, it will then return. I can call all of the out-of-the-box connectors. There's many, 1,000 plus from many different third parties or your own custom connectors. So you can see here, get all payments or add a payment, get a payment by ID. I'm going to select this one. And once I've done that, I now can give the LLM a definition of all of the different parameters that that's using. So it can then take that natural language natural language conversation I'm having with it and integrate with it. So I'll just let it do that, and then now it's giving the connection. I can define the authentication. I can give the definition of it, and all this information I'm providing here then gets used by the LLM to interpret my query. So here's the Contoso Real Estate website. So let's see if I can actually integrate with this. So we're going to try this together because it's AI, so who knows?
It's live. Now you know it's live, really.
Yeah. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to how do I search for properties? Because when you create a website using Power Pages, it automatically creates this AI assistant for you. And it naturally will have all the information that's provided in your Power Pages website. And it uses the RAG pattern to enable me to ask questions about it. So I'm asking for information about how do I search for properties, and it's giving me information there, and it's giving me a link to that page. So you can see immediately I didn't need to do anything, it did that immediately. But now, because I've created that custom connector and I've added that action, I'm now going to ask, well, what about payment 5, ID 5? What amount was that? So I'm logged in, and so it should now go and call that. And because there is a C# provider behind the scenes, it will now invoke that and then go and call my Azure function and return the information. But before, when we did it in the custom connector, it returned JSON. But what it's just done is it's now retrieved that JSON, and it's using the LLM to actually now create a human readable, and it's actually said what the payment is 123 USD. Those were two different fields. It's worked out automatically that the currency needs to be added to the amount. I'm going to try my luck, and I'm going to say, what is the payment date? This is, who knows what could happen now. But what I'm trying to show you here is you can actually have a conversation about your data. And so what it will do is it will say, OK, well, it knows about the structure of this payment. And what it should do is it now should find that there is, we already have told it that we're interested in payment ID 5. And so there we go. It's got come on, round of applause. Come on, Could have gone horribly wrong, but. Because I've created this custom connector, I can also then create a virtual table. And what that looks like is here is C# here, and what we're doing here is we're calling a API which is our Azure function, and we're mapping the results of that to the Dataverse metadata structure, and then I'm returning it in my C# custom virtual table provider, which means now if I go into a model-driven app, here is exactly the same as my listings, and it's just viewed as a table, and there are all my payments, so it looks exactly the same. And because I can do that, if I sign into Power Pages, what we can do then is actually even integrate it into Power Pages as a standard table. So if I go into admin here, I've just logged in because obviously it's secured, and that's a built-in feature of I needed to do nothing other than simply define that this table is only accessible by people who are at admin. And there we go. There is the data. And that's come directly from that back-end Azure function.
All right, that's really cool, and this is just the beginning, really. And again, you can have a look on this repository, on this full stack solution, and you can try yourself extending with Power Platform. Let's review what we have seen today, okay? We have seen how Power Platform is actually built on Azure and extends Azure, and you can extend with code. It's basically an Azure in a box, right? It will it will make your life simpler. We also have seen that we have lots of development tools. We saw just a few developer tools. We have a lot more, and we have also more ways for you to extend. We explored front-end, how do we extend front-end, also back-end, but we didn't talk about tests. We don't have time, but I want to share another thing as well. We have a test engine to help you to automate UI testing, right? And that supports Canvas application. We have some news to share on that as well. We will be supporting extensibility of that test engine. So you will be able to create your own tests beyond Canvas applications. It's really more full developer capacity for UI automation. We will be, after this session, in the expert area. If you want to know more about that, Peter Vilatsing is the guy you want to connect. We have lots of plans on that for test automation, okay? Scott, what are your key takeaways from this session today?
Well, the story continues. That story that I told you at the beginning. So my takeaway for you is to, if you've not seen Power Platform, if you've not played with it, please go and check it out. See how you may be able to use it to not replace everything, but how you can use it to start to experiment, and you can start to innovate, and you can integrate with your existing systems. And think about Azure and Power Platform as a single landscape. Okay, these are all, you're just simply picking the right tools, and you're picking the tools that you want to get the most benefit from, and they're the most appropriate. And think about all of the benefits that you're going to get from Power Platform in terms of, down the line, the governance, and then using Azure where really it's the differentiator, where you really need that functionality. If you want to go and find out more about learning about source code management, you can go to the AKMS/PP/ALM. You can learn to write PCF controls as well, some of the technologies we showed you there, aka.ms/PCF, and also custom connectors, aka ms/learn custom connectors. And there is a fantastic resource that shows you a single page with loads and loads of great goodness about developing on Power Platform, aka/ms/pp/dev. And as Marcel says, we're going to be up in the experts meetup. And please just come and see us. And we'll love to have a conversation about your specific use cases, how you're using Power Platform, any questions you've got, or if you're thinking about Power Platform might be appropriate and you just want to have a discussion with us. But it's been a real privilege to talk to you, and I really hope that you have an amazing rest of your build. Yes,
thank you very much. Also, just quickly, if you want to connect with our development team, we are very active on GitHub. Connect us, Power Platform build tools. It's very easy to find our repo, post your issue, test our tools. And yes, I'm very lucky to be here today with Scott. And thank you very much. Come talk to us.